recognize this technique?
Hey guys, today I'm going to talk about Dragon Age Inquisition and its controversial questing system. Inquisition is very much a love it or hate it game. While it was critically acclaimed, many people were turned off by the game's quests. I'm inclined to agree that the quests are rather lackluster, but I want to take a closer look and see why that is the case. So let's go ahead and analyze how Dragon Age Inquisition handles questing. Since the focus of this video is questing, I'm going to go over Inquisition's structure as well as its questing system before we get to the analysis of it. The structure is straightforward. The player has this dope looking mountain castle called Skyhold that acts as a central hub where the player interacts with party members and manages their equipment. And the most important part of this hub is the war table. The war table is a map of two countries, Orlais and Ferelden, which is where the game's events take place. Throughout the game, different operations will appear on the map. Mission operations allow you to send out one of three different types of agents to complete it. Each mission has an amount of time it'll take to complete, and often the reward is inconsequential, such as some influence, supplies, or gold. The important operations are the scouting ones, and unlike the mission operations, these cost power. What is power? I'm glad you asked. Power is a resource gained through questing that allows you to do story missions as well as unlock new areas with the before mentioned scouting operations. Inquisition has 10 main quest areas as well as towns and smaller quest-specific zones. Each area plays out sort of like an MMO, with tons of points of interest lighting up your map and resources to gather. The quests keep in line with this MMO motif of go here and kill X amount of Ys. There are also requisitions to do, which are just delivering materials to gain power or upgrade your mountain home. The areas have their own flavor and story to them, which is picked up via journal entries and small bits of context from quests. The goal of these quests is to give the player more power as well as experience and gear. When the player has enough power, they can unlock some new areas or spend it doing main story missions. The main story missions are way more in depth and take place in their own unique areas. The story has decisions that lead to different outcomes, such as an early one where the player can either side with the Templars or mages, and depending on your choice, lead to two distinct missions. The formula here is easy to understand. Do quests to gain power, and use that power to do story missions and unlock new areas, rinse and repeat. Now we get to the fun part. Are these systems solid or are they no good? Well, I don't think the answer is quite that simple. Let's start by addressing the obvious and huge drawback to the structure. The quests are largely shallow and simple. It has never been a compliment to compare a single-player RPG's quests to that of an MMO. The sheer amount of them does not make up for the depth that they provide. So, the reason for the amount of quests in Inquisition is because of the size of the game world and the power system. And I'm going to be straight up with this one. The power system is completely unnecessary. I found myself wondering throughout the game why it's even there in the first place. The whole point of making the player accumulate power is to make them do side quests, thus making them wait to unlock new areas and main story missions. But the enemies scale within a range. All the main story missions have a level range, such as in this mission, the enemies will scale between levels 4 and 7 compared to whatever your level is. So the players already have to do quests to level up in order to do these missions anyway. So why even have the power system in place to begin with? It seems like a shortcut to control pacing, but if they did away with it, it would allow for less quests, which would have means development time could have been spent making the quests meatier. But without the power system, this brings up the second half of the battle, which is the world size. Inquisition's areas are rather large, especially the hinterlands, which is bigger than Kanye West's ego. The question is, would it have been possible for areas to have been this large without enough quests to populate it? I think so. When it comes to large game areas, there are a few things for the player to do. Explore the given area, engage in sandbox activities, or do the activities the designers implemented, aka quests. Inquisition leans heavily on the third. Exploration is tricky business in Inquisition. In order for it to be fun, you have to provide an incentive and a place for the player to explore. While Inquisition's areas do have a large scope to them, they rarely have anything off the beaten path that doesn't already tie into a quest, which would fall under designer-implemented activities. That is not to say that caves and dungeons in RPGs aren't designer-implemented. They obviously were, but there's a big difference in feel between stumbling upon a cave on your own and exploring it and being specifically told to go there. In Inquisition's case, you're almost always told to go there by one person or another. Thus, it does not feel like exploration, but a guided tour. Another point to note is the game is in third person, which creates a barrier between the player and the world. I find it hard to get immersed when in third person, because you're always focused on the character's direction opposed to the environment. It also does not help that the game is segmented into areas, which makes the world always feel boxed in. It's a combination of these traits that makes exploration and Inquisition not a main focus of the game. Now moving on to sandbox activities. Simply put, the game doesn't have any. Unlike Grand Theft Auto, there's no AI to exploit or interact with that allows for organic, free-ranged emergent gameplay. That is, situations that arise from interactions of game mechanics. That isn't necessarily the fault of Inquisition, as Inquisition's goal is to tell the designer-made story, while games that have a focus on emergent gameplay focus on telling the player's story through the mechanics. There's a lot of discussion about Inquisition on the decisions players made during the game's story, but I've never heard any stories about the things that the players did in the game mechanically, stories that you hear a lot when talking about Skyrim or GTA. At last we come to the aspect that Inquisition leaned heavily on, designer-implemented activities, and in this case, that is the quests. It's pretty self-explanatory how Inquisition fits this one. There are quests, lots of them. In fact, most of the content in this game game was put in for the players to follow specifically. You'd be hard-pressed to find anything to do in this game outside the points of interest on the map. You can close rifts, do quests, kill dragons, claim landmarks, and sometimes capture outposts. The more there is of a specific activity, the more it boils down to, go here and press X. Now this isn't inherently bad. Borderlands and plenty of RPGs have lots of quests. What matters here is a lack of context to each one. It is a missed opportunity because it really could have brought home the point of the Inquisitor helping everyone to make a name for the Inquisition. In Origins, every decision felt like it had weight to it. Take for example this quest about a sick Hala. The quest is very short and can even be accomplished in the same conversation that starts it, but I find it effective because the player has agency in the situation. It can be handled in different ways with multiple outcomes. I feel like I was actively taking part in a situation, which in turn immersed me in the world. Even the smallest objective felt personal instead of the strange emptiness that is constantly apparent outside the main quest in Inquisition. If anything is indicative of this impersonalness, it's that the camera never engages the NPC, nor do they ever have more than a few lines of dialogue. The side quests are shallow at best, but absolutely devoid of personality at worst. There are a few quests that have worth, but they are so few and far between that as a player, I just don't feel involved. Since side quests are a large portion of your 30-hour plus playtime, they should be supporting the game's other mechanics, and I do think it accomplishes that. The quests always provide enough enemies to kill, which supports the game's combat, which if you don't like, you're just kinda fucked with this one. It also provides the player with proper motivation to move around the zones, which exposes them to the different crafting components. That is nice since you could just grab a few obsidian or any other metal here and there without the need to grind to collect it. Through multiple quests, you are exposed to the story of each zone more and more, which paints a broader picture of the world. It is at least effective at these things, which makes it have some merit. The core of the problem is that the quests just do not stand on their own. Good quests can make a game with shitty mechanics better. Take for example the first Witcher game. In my apparent minority opinion, The Witcher is mostly a bad game. The combat sucks, the leveling is unrewarding, and you run around through swamps 95% of the game. But at least the quests feel involved and are interesting to follow. I didn't do many of them because I wanted to get through the game, but at least they had some semblance of personality that broke up the monotonous second and third chapters. A good example of this is the Old Friends of Mine quest. In this quest, Geralt is invited to a party by his friend Shani. The player can choose from many different characters as their +1, and depending on their choice, the party will change accordingly. What ensues is a series of awkward conversation and wooden voice acting that manages to ooze a charm that for a brief moment made me forget how terrible the rest of the game is. In fact, that could be said about all of Witcher's shining moments. These types of quests pull up the rest of the game and make it feel worthwhile without the need of other mechanics to support it. The bulk of the decisions the player can make outside the story in Inquisition is judging the criminals you've encountered from some of the side quests in the story missions. The utility of this is to offer the player a sense of agency they desire from the side quests that isn't there. I do love this mechanic as it further serves the point of the player being in charge of what is essentially their own governing entity. I only wish there were more tied in with side quests, but the judgments are provided with enough context that the decision requires some pondering. It does help alleviate some of the disappointments from the side quests. I'm gonna say some nice things now because I'm stricken with guilt. Since this game is about questing, and after all, the game does have a main quest. I don't really have much analysis to say other than, it's great. A highlight of it is the Masquerade mission. It manages to combine social interactions with exploration and combat. The idea is you schmooze around with the nobility to build up a rapport, and that rapport acts as a resource that steadily drains when you sneak around the mansion to find clues or loot. This quest blends its elements well together and plays unlike any other mission I've played in an RPG. The point of this is to illustrate that the missions in Inquisition are well thought out, and that is where all the time and energy went to. It's a shame it didn't bleed into the side quests, though. The companion quests also feel on point. It wouldn't be a BioWare game if I couldn't romance a virtual waifu. Each companion has their own set of side quests that have a proper story, even if they don't provide a wide range of choices for the player. These quests are more of what I wanted out of the rest of the game's side quests. They did good, so thumbs up.
Listen, boy. My first love story.
In conclusion, the questing system does offer some meaningful decisions and storylines in the form of companion and main quests, but finding something substantial outside of that is few and far between. This creates a sense of shallowness that can draw players out of the experience when it should reinforce the feeling of gathering allies to fight the forces of evil. But overall, there are some pros and cons to the system. The pros are, it allowed for expansive areas, provided the player with enough time to gather resources without feeling the need to grind for them, dispersed the lore in a reasonable way, and gave players plenty to do. And the cons, loses player retention over long play sessions, feels shallow, misses chances for player agency, lesser feeling of importance per quest, and relies too much on other mechanics to retain player interest. So what do you think? For those of you who have played it, did the questing system get to you, or do you find it enjoyable? Let me know in the comments below.